Hey, what is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Should You Buy Anthem Part 2 with your host, Kenkukun. Now, as you can see on the screen in just a moment, you'll see one of the boss fights of the Stronghold. This is kind of what I'm going to review, is the Strongholds and the potential this game has, but has yet to tap into. As you see these rings of fire coming out, that's a mechanic of the boss. I think that's pretty cool. You're also going to see another couple of mechanics like his laser beam. Here comes shooting. He's going to shoot out fireballs. He has stages of attacks, and he goes, and it's a rinse and repeat structure, which is fine. That's a boss mechanic. Those are fine. I like those, but there can be more. Now, let me dial it back a little bit. We need to define difficulty in a game. I'm going to read off the definition of difficulty. 3 variances. Difficulty, the state or condition of being difficult. A thing that is hard to accomplish, deal with, or understand. A situation that is difficult or dangerous. The definition of difficulty is different for each person. Let's go ahead and put that into a little perspective. This team right here shreds this boss in under 2 minutes. Me included. This is on normal difficulty. I wanted to show the end boss, but I couldn't because there was a bug that stopped me from doing that. I would get to the cutscene before it showed the final boss. It would glitch out. It would never progress. I tried this Stronghold 3-4 times. Didn't work. Now, let me put into perspective Strongholds. Strongholds are dungeons. If you play Destiny 2, it's like a strike. If you play MMOs, it's like a dungeon. It's just a classic dungeon in RPGs. That's the equivalent of it. So, now that we got that underway, I played this 2 or 3 times. The second team I got had a really rough time beating that boss. It came down to me as the last person, and I was just shooting the boss. I knew the mechanics. I kind of did it. It was difficult for them. That level of difficulty was difficult for them on normal with those boss mechanics, but on hard, it was not so for me. On normal, it was not so for me. Sorry, I played it on hard earlier. And as the difficulty scales up, it just changes from the boss has more health, does more damage. And then the next threshold, 1, 2, 3, which is hard, Grandmaster 2, 1, 2, and 3, it just gets more health, more damage output. I don't think that's a very good way to increase difficulty in games. Now, we're going to go ahead and define 2 other definitions of difficulty for video gaming. Now, these are not, you may not find this in the dictionary. I didn't go to some website like I did for the definition of dictionary. I didn't look it up in a book. This is what I believe are difficulty differences in games. One is natural difficulty. Games that are famous for natural difficulty, games that are hard to just play, are the Souls games. Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, along with Breath of the Wild. Those are natural difficult games. And every game has its own natural difficulty, but I feel like, especially the Souls series, it kind of brings that into light a little bit more than other games. I can't think of others. I didn't want to think of others. Sue me. So, Dark Souls, and Demon Souls, all the Souls games, they rewarded you for paying attention to the environment, what enemies were weak to. I remember Demon Souls, the first boss that you came across, it was a big blob monster. It was all a bunch of blobs, and you killed them by breaking off blobs, killing the blobs one by one. The monster slowly got smaller. It's been a very long time since I played it. I apologize for the terms I'm using for the monsters' names, so on and so forth. So, but it was weak to fire. It was weak to piercing. You could come at it with a spear. You could come at it with fire bombs. You actually picked up fire bombs in the beginning of the game. You didn't know what they were used for, whether you should use them or not. But hey, guess what? It actually helped out because the enemy was weak. On top of that, you could write little signs on the ground from the players for other players to read, such as try piercing damage, try fire, try this, or the classic fake wall here, but it's really not a fake wall and you're just slapping on all the walls and some troll just got you. And now you got to put down the sign that says liar here in front of the fake wall. So, before I get off topic there, so there's natural difficult games. Boss mechanics in the Souls games, it comes down to not only the whole level where you kind of gotta remember where the enemies are. You come across a trap, kind of know the signs. After I played so many Souls games, after a time, I was like, man, other than the boss fights get really cool. Getting to the boss fights, they're kind of repetitive. I really wish they would reinvent the wheel here with traps. I want I would like roguelike things, but that's natural difficulty. Getting to a boss and learning its mechanics, that's a natural difficulty too, as well as a pattern difficulty. You got to recognize what's going to happen and try to combat it. It's combat in Dark Souls and Demon Souls, block or dodge, one or the other, and it was usually dodge over the block. A lot of times you'd block, get stumbled, and still die, or it would be even worse. So you had that. Breath of the Wild kind of repaid you with natural difficulty by paying attention to the environment, trying new things. Hey, what happens if you light this on fire? What happens if you set this, set a bomb here and blow this up? You just kind of paid attention to the enemies, what they were kind of weak to. The same thing with the Soul series, just not as in depth. So that is natural difficulty right there. And now we have mechanical difficulty. Now this will pertain mainly to MMO type games other than MMOs. One of the biggest games out there is Destiny and Destiny 2. Now, over the years, Destiny and Destiny 2 has progressively gotten better with their mechanics. They started in D1 where I think it was with Crota. If it happened with Atheon, I don't remember. Crota, the raid of Crota was the second raid Destiny released. They introduced the story mission with swords. You would go around slapping swords into enemies. Some enemies were strictly immune to anything but sword damage. And then the boss fight heavily rotated around swords. So not only do you have a mechanical difficulty, the game over the years has been training players to get ready for the raid. Some raids they didn't do that, and some raids they did. So they did it in Destiny 1 with Crota's Sword. Destiny 2, they did it with Soul. If you remember who that is, a wizard. You throw a ball around before you actually threw balls around in one of the raids for Leviathan's raid lair, I believe it was. And one of the biggest raids they brought in mechanically was one of the best raids to that day, and they've progressively gotten better, was Callus's raid lair. Everyone thought it was too difficult. It was too mechanically difficult. There weren't a lot of bosses. It was a lot of puzzles and rooms to get through, and it wasn't the typical here's two bosses and now here's the main boss. It was all mechanical, and I thought that was one of the most fun raids they had ever produced, and they've only gone up. I have not played the most recent one that came out because, I'll get around to it. I just kind of more interested in PvP. If you know me or watch me on Twitch, that's what I like the most. I've kind of gotten over the old PvE formula that Destiny has almost introduced in everything but the raids. The raids keep coming out strong. Now, their strikes, on the other hand, they're kind of weaker. There are some mechanics for bosses, but it's basic, I really want a little bit more, but at the same time, that may be too difficult for others. So I'm maybe a little more on the hardcore side of that. But Destiny 2 has mechanical difficulty in the game that only progresses and gets better. Now, Anthem. Not really too much mechanical difficulty. As I said, you have difficulty levels. They go up from, easy, normal, hard, Grandmaster 1, 2, and 3. And the enemies just get a health boost. You could pop into a room of 20 of these little scorpions on screen and slaughter them. You go into Grandmaster, 20 of them on screen, and you're just sitting there shooting things forever with no real way to get out of a small room. You're trapped in a hallway. You bump your head. I mean, there are so many things. You could just get slaughtered by these things. It's actually pretty nasty to think about. So I'm going to talk about the strongholds that they have. The last stronghold that they have, spoilers, by the way, last stronghold that they have is the main story. Is part of the main story. The second to last stronghold that you can get your hands on is part of the main story. It is the last mission. You fight the main antagonist of this game at the point. So what you witnessed there earlier in the video was a little Ash Titan. That's a pre-boss. That's kind of like a raid. That's like raid 101s or dungeons 101s in MMO. Here's a boss, fight it, move on. Here's a boss, fight it, move on, get to the next boss. Well, you had one boss, and then you had a slew of little puzzles where you kind of sat there and you collected things to open up a door. You kind of sat in one spot to work up a signal strength and to progress through the story. Those are fine and dandy, but to me, those get really repetitive really fast, and it's actually the formula that is used in this game a lot more than it should. I went and watched a video by Upper Echelon Gaming. He brought it up. I never thought about it because I just didn't think about it. I think my eyes are still a little, my eyes and my mind are still a little, man, this game is nice and fresh. And for me to critically review it, I may miss things that others do not miss. So if you want to check out that video, and most of you probably already do, but anyone that watches me, want to check out Upper Echelon Gaming. I don't know how to put anything on the screen. Just type it in best you can. I'm sure Google will auto search it. Pretty big views, probably top search. So go ahead and check that out. But yeah, it's the formula used a lot. I don't like reused formulas all the time. I will get tired of that fast. So that's why overall I think people should kind of wait for the game and see what happens. And I think in 3 months, I'm hoping for next month that it's going to be even better, but it's going to have a lack of content. So I feel like, let me take it back to the difficulty. So the last boss, let me explain this. You're going to have to visually see this in your head, because again, I couldn't get the footage. I apologize. The last boss of the story mission is a stronghold. The fight consists of, he just turns into a big giant guy. Oh ho! What's most, in my experience, most games that just have, here's a giant boss to fight, it's kind of a boring fight. They feel like the more boring fights. But what they tap into, what Anthem taps into here, is really good potential. So the fight starts off, he has a big giant sword, he swings it around the room, and he comes after you. Now you just kind of for me as a storm, I can hover in the air most of the time. I just kind of fly around and avoid it. And at some point in time, he's going to hit you with a move. You're going to have to dodge it. If you don't dodge it, now you're stuck on the ground. And then there was a mechanic where he threw his sword, and then he teleported to it. I don't know if anything happened when you stood near it. I didn't stand near it, but this is the type of mechanic. If he just teleported to the sword and did nothing, didn't attack you, swing on you, do like a blast damage on you, that's kind of like you're missing an opportunity to force the player to adapt to the fight. Now, they did, however, go into stages of the boss. The boss had 3 stages. The first stage was, you just shot him until he ran away, went to a different area. The second stage, he was in a different area, used a different move set. He had little acid guys running around, little scorpions that shot acid out. That wasn't too big of a problem. Again, as Storm, I just hovered around the room and continually shot at him. I stopped shooting at the scorpions when I noticed they would not stop coming. I'm just like, oh, the endless wave of enemies. That's fun. Not really. It really wasn't fun. So I shot him instead. And lo and behold, we progressed with the fight. Then we got to the end fight. This is where the most mechanics come in, and it was one mechanic. He started placing bombs on the floor. Now, what you had to do with those bombs, the game said, shoot those bombs before they blow you up. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I seen the floor. They were all over the place. They were slowly expanding. They were just, it looked like overwhelming odds. I started shooting the bombs. It took like 1 bullet. It wasn't that hard. After a time, I was like, wait, I can fly. I flew up in the air, stopped shooting the bombs, and lo and behold, no consequences. Now, they have another mechanic in the game I'd like to bring out now, and that is, there are little devices that actually happen in the stronghold before that disable flying. They could have thrown that in there. Not a device that you had to break or sit on to reduce the signal, which is usually what it is. Stand here, upload the signal, decrypt the signal, whatever it does, and then now your flight's re-enabled. They could have just had passing blips. It's like, he has now disabled your flight capabilities because he can. He's the boss now. Deal with it. Right? And now you do have to shoot that. It's like, all right, here's a mechanic we're forced to deal with, and we got to shoot a safety zone in an area, and then, now stand in the safety zone. Other bigger MMOs would have made one blast bomb be like, if you don't kill this bomb, you all die, and it's over. And like, that's a raid wipe mechanic. It's just like, all right, if we don't all kill this really strong, healthy, tough bomb, we all get to die. Sucks to be us. But at the same time, I wouldn't expect that in a strike, for a raid wipe mechanic to be in a strike, but that's kind of where they should be going with this stuff. They kind of have the general direction. They just need to go a little bit farther. There's a second stronghold after that, and it has a boss mechanic that's a little different. Spoilers if you didn't play the third stronghold, here we go. There's the little spider tank boss. I forget what it's called. It's the 4-legged tank that we had in the VIP demo. You've seen it multiple times. It's there, that's the boss, but it doesn't walk. Now, I had to play this duo because my teammate kept getting my teammates got disconnected and it wouldn't fill anyone else in, so it was me and one other person. So, on top of that, it was just us fighting this boss. We got it 2 phases down. Now, this is a boss mechanic that I thought was kind of cool. It was just right for a stronghold, and I would like to see more of that going forward. The boss, you shot its health down, and the boss became immune. A shield popped up around him, 3 little pylons popped up in the room with fan blades, and you had to shoot the arm that connected to the fan that was making the fan blades turn, and just charging his shield to make him immune. Now, he could shoot you while he was immune. On top of that, enemies spawned. Now, it wasn't an overabundance of enemies that spawned, so they weren't too hard to deal with, but it was the type of enemies that spawned. In Wave 1, the enemies that spawned were those little scars that send out little seeking bombs that blow up when they get close to you. Those tracking proximity bombs that travel on the ground. Those were the hardest things to deal with because just two of those enemies could send out 2 at a time. Now, we have limited cover. We have to stay in cover from the boss, and I'll explain that in a moment. The boss would shred through you. It was very hard to deal with. So we had to stay in cover, dodge these bombs, and kill these enemies that you had to shoot while dodging. It's a lot of work. So I felt like those enemies right there, having more than one was too much. You could survive one blast. I could survive one blast on my storm. Guess what? The other guy was a storm. He was a little higher level than me, but still, storm nonetheless. We are the squishiest of the group. We could survive 1 bomb, but not 2. You have 2 guys sending out 2 bombs, that was a wrap. So my way to combat that was I would save my ultimate for those guys. I know they're coming. I'm going to save my ultimate. Besides, someone needed to. The other guy was using his ultimate to damage the boss. That way we weren't sitting there for an extra long time just shooting at the boss with our abilities when we run out of ammo and don't want to leave cover because we're too scared we're going to get blasted away. Now, that was the coolest mechanic of the boss. The second time we got him into the immune phase, another type of enemy spawned. Not more enemies, just it felt like one enemy type replaced one of the others. So we had like the basic standard soldier, we had the mine-seeking guys, and then we had one of the hunters, I believe it was, that came with a shield. All right, we had to deal with that. So again, I was glad I saved my super ultimate. Man, sounds cool. My ultimate move. And he kept using it for the boss. Well, eventually I got kicked out, never got back in, and I never went back to that battle. I also want to note that that boss was extremely powerful. It had 3 moves. It had a machine gun that shredded through you. This was on Grandmaster 1, mind you guys. I did this. It had a machine gun that would shred through you. It had a cluster bomb of rockets that shoot at you in a volley of 3 waves, 1, 2, 3, at everyone at once. There was only 2 of us in there, so it only shot 3 sets of volleys to 2 separate targets. Well, we were hiding in the same spot, so I mean, it was practically just shooting a bunch of missiles at both of us. And then he had the cannon buster move. I don't know what it's called. He takes a line target with a laser beam. If it's looking at you, you need to move because here it comes, ready or not. You're about to get blasted. Catch you later. If that hit you, you died. The only other thing I would like to say is that boss needed to be toned down a little bit. So there were a couple times where me and the other guy were spread out in the room because we had to shoot the fan blades around the room. We couldn't stand in one spot and shoot them. We kind of had to move. So we moved from cover to cover. He flew around, got lucky sometimes he didn't, and he would get shot out of the air really quickly, and hopefully wasn't in the open. A lot of times it was. So we were spread out and we were shooting at him from 2 different angles. Well, I noticed that his laser beam was coming. He was looking at the other guy. I was like, oh, okay. The other guy took cover, and that boss whipped within the span of, I swear, it was less than half a second. I'm no expert. I'd say a millisecond. He whipped that cannon right on me as he was pulling the trigger. It was like instantly blasted me away in a time that I had no way to react. I couldn't react. I couldn't jump. I couldn't teleport because I can teleport dodge. It was just bloop, done. That happened multiple times. Not where he looked away from my teammate, but once we noticed how deadly that was, I never peeked again. after it hit me a few times. I got burned by fire too many times. I was actually jumping up over the wall, like, all right, I want to jump over the wall. As he's shooting his machine gun, I need to get him to trigger what seemed like I needed him to trigger his volley of rocket launchers. So he's shooting his machine gun. It looked like if no one looked at him, I'd jump up over the wall or peek around cover. Jumping was faster because it immediately brought me down to the ground without me having to press left or right back on my keyboard to move my guy back in cover. So I jump up, let gravity do its job. Well, there was a couple of times where I didn't notice that he was already ready to use his Tank Buster cannon. Well, guess what? I jumped up and he's looking in a whole different direction, and then bloop, he just whips over to me and lets it rip, and that's the end of my guy. So, I feel like the boss was fine. He had the perfect mechanics for a stronghold. He was a little overpowered in his target acquisition is what I'm going to call it. But he had a mechanic to him. It was shoot a boss, become immune, deal with the mechanics. That's a fine mechanic. They need to move forward with stuff like that, with things like that. They need to force us. That forced me and the other guy to do something about the mechanic. Unlike the bombs on the final boss fight of the story, the bombs on the ground, where I'm just gonna fly in the air. There were other places where people could stand up on rocks and little structures and just be safe as long as they don't get knocked off, and they were fine too. Which actually was the more fun stronghold. I thought that stronghold was a lot more fun than the stronghold with the mechanic in the room that actually made sense and felt practical. So that's where I think the game needs to go with strongholds. And everything else, the Shaper Storms, the raids, if those are 2-in-1 thing, that they can't botch that. And if they do, they better come out swinging the next time, like Destiny has done. And in fact, Destiny's raids came out great, and it kind of declined a little bit and then picked right back up. And it's been on a ever upward incline for the longest time. So again, should you buy Anthem? I think you should wait, to be honest. I'm going to keep playing it. I want to be there with the waves. I have 2 copies on PlayStation. I have a copy pre-ordered on PlayStation, and then I have the EA access on PC, but I think I'm going to get the game on PC. I'm going to forego PlayStation. I'm going to cancel my pre-order because I don't think it's where it needs to be just yet, and I don't think it has earned $120 from me. That's for damn sure. Has it earned $60 from me? I guess. There's a lot of things that it needs to do. If I wanted content for PvE, I would go play a different game, to be honest. But I'm liking this game because it's new. So the new polish is still in my eyes, and that's kind of why I'm gonna stick with it a little bit. Even though other game like Division 2 is right around the corner, I want to play that as well, and I think I will. So Anthem has the potential. Now they just have to make that potential bloom. And that's all they really need to do. So wait and see is what I think you should do with Anthem. I hope you enjoy this. Hit the subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and I will catch you a little bit later. Enjoy your day.